The Australian government today stepped up its anxious efforts in Canberra and Beijing to glean more details from China on the detention of Stern Hu. The Rio Tinto executive is being held without charge in Shanghai following accusations of bribery, espionage and theft of state secrets. Such claims were dismissed today by those who have known and worked with Stern Hu throughout his long career in various Australian corporations. Former colleagues of Mr Hu have joined those who are suggesting his detention may have more to do with a general deterioration in Australian-Chinese relations, triggering further crossfire between political rivals in Canberra. Business editor Greg Hoy reports.
How to soothe an angry dragon. The fiery standoff continues over the detention without charge in Shanghai of Rio Tinto's iron ore executive Stern Hu, who had been leading negotiations on the now overdue settlement with Chinese steel mills of new pricing levels for Australian iron ore exports. China's foreign ministry has said it has proof Stern Hu is guilty of bribing Chinese steel mill executives and stealing state secrets. But like the Australian government, those who know Mr Hu remain most sceptical.
Stern is an outstanding individual with basically an impeccable character, and I just find it very difficult to believe that he would have done anything to get himself in this sort of trouble.
For 20 years, businessman Ron Gosby worked with Stern Hu at Electronics Corporation AWA.
My feeling is that perhaps Stern was providing information back, market intelligence back to his company in Perth, and that's been taken as being giving away state secrets. I've never really come across anything like this in China before, and I've been working in the China market for about 22 years. To me, market intelligence is a normal part of doing business, regardless of whether it's here in Australia or abroad. And I just find this whole situation very peculiar.
The handling of this affair is an increasing concern to both business and government.
Regrettably, I have taken a lot of the information which goes to the circumstances surrounding his detention from statements made by the official spokesperson for the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and from a Shanghai State Security Bureau website. I would have much preferred that this information was presented and provided in the usual diplomatic way.
We're really looking for clarity, and that's something that business in China has progressed very, very substantially in the past few years, where people had a lot of confidence in being able to do business under nearly Western-type regime. And this has taken a significant back step most recently.
Back home now from his European tour, the Prime Minister did not emerge to discuss the crisis today, while the opposition certainly did.
The government must stop pussyfooting around and raise this matter with the Chinese government in Beijing. This is a Beijing to Canberra issue, and the government must deal with it immediately.
What we're seeing here is that the Foreign Minister and the Prime Minister are paralysed. They are worried about the relationship. They are not worried about the Australian citizen. And that is what Australian governments must do.
It's very important that sensitive situations like this are dealt with in a cautious and considered way. The government's taking an appropriate stand in dealing with the problem of Hu Stern and making sure that all avenues are pursued in an appropriate way. We don't wish to play these moves out in public, and it's ultimately a decision for the government as to what point and whether the Prime Minister speaks directly to his counterpart.
Stern Hu is caught, it seems, in the great divide between China's automatic presumption of guilt and Australia's traditional presumption of innocence until objectively proven guilty. If it hasn't already, this diplomatic crisis is fast becoming a very serious test of Australia's relationship with what is now its largest trading partner. If this is not all about Mr Hu, the question must be asked: how could we have so offended such an important customer customer. Those who are familiar with doing business in China have suggested there are possible offences, including the implication arising from Australia's latest Defence White Paper that China may be considered a strategic threat to Australia, plus other offences, with unfortunate timing, which together might provide a substantial test of the diplomatic skills of Australia's Mandarin-speaking Prime Minister. Though charming Beijing with his fluent Mandarin, some argue the Prime Minister, having once been accused of being too close to the Chinese, was the only national leader in the world to criticise the Chinese on the recent 20th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre.
Mr. Speaker, on the 4th of June 1989, a long-running demonstration in Tiananmen Square in Beijing had a tragic end. The Australian Parliament expressed its outrage at what had happened and condemned ongoing repression against those who had participated in it. Our views have not changed.
Another possibility, the meeting with the Dalai Lama in Tibet 10 days ago by an Australian parliamentary delegation led by Labor's Michael Danby.
I'm not going to speculate on hypotheticals about what may be occurring. The government has to take a considered approach to ensuring that it achieves the best possible outcome for the person concerned, and that usually doesn't involve political posturing of the kind that the opposition is carrying on with.
I think Australian business or international business should lobby the Chinese Foreign Trade Minister and the Ministry. I think if the ground rules have changed in China, then Australian business needs to be totally aware of that.
However, questions over the pricing power of Australian iron ore producers still looms largest in this standoff. Observers believe what may have most upset the Chinese is that after Rio Tinto recently rejected the Chinese state-owned Chinalco's $19 billion investment offer, only in the media did the Chinese then learn that Rio Tinto had instead struck a deal to amalgamate its production in the Pilbara with Australia's other major miner, BHP Billiton. Combined, they will become the world's largest iron ore exporter, further reducing the pricing power of Chinese steel mills. Prior to his arrest, Stern Hu was in effect leading negotiations on the new price levels for Chinese steel mills for Australian iron ore producers, which would have set prices as well for the Brazilians. Negotiations which remain frozen, as Australia's relations with China have become frosty.
I would not be surprised if Rio Tinto took a commercial step back and either BHP or Brazil's Vale took up the lead negotiator stance to try and get a resolution and move away from very, very significant political overtones with this situation at the moment. It's a question of weighing up the short term and the long term. There may be an initial rush from the iron ore producers to quickly get a settlement given the uncertainty of the situation. But moving forward, the uncertainty of the situation may in fact mean that China has to pay a risk premium in essence for access to the iron ore, which may work against China longer term.
Such is the great morass that now separates the national interests of China and Australia, and literally caught in the Middle Kingdom, with little likelihood of early release. Rio Tinto's Stern Hu, whose wife and 3 daughters, all from Perth, are anxiously awaiting developments.
It's going to be difficult for him, I think. I think it would be extremely difficult for him. He's a very gentle person, great sense of humour. But, he's totally dedicated to his family, and I think any incarceration of such a period would be devastating.
Greg Hoy with that report.